Dr. Rambam, Hilchos Tefilin, Mezuzah B'Sefer Torah, Perek Zayin. This is actually the first perek of Hilchos Tefilin.
Right.
Aleph through Hey, Dalid was Tefillin, Hey and Vav was Mezuzah. Zayin begins Sefer Torah. Mitzvah, say it's a positive mitzvah. Kol Yish V'ish V'Yisrael, every single Jewish man, not a woman, mind you. Rambam holds the pashas that it's the chiyuv on a man, not a woman. For themselves. The main reason for the mitzvah is to make sure that we're learning Torah. That's the main akkud. The women have a chiyuv Talmud Torah. Also, in the terms of the Sefer Torah being kosher mitzvah Sefer Torah, a woman lav dafka according to the Rambam can write a Sefer Torah. Film is for sure she can't write. The Sefer Torah and pashas also no. Some Hashem hold yes. Rambam holds not.
Why yes by Sefer Torah?
Because that parsha chsavtam kshartam is talked from is about it. So the women are not mechuyev for either reason. Now, does this Sefer Torah have to be a Sefer Torah? It's kosher l'chapon. The other one just have to be a Sefer Torah for a text to write. Good question. Okay, but pashtus is the kosher Sefer Torah. So every yid should write one for himself. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk in Parashat Hazinu, "Va'at there now," says Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Kisvu lechem, write for yourselves, plural, not just you, all you." As Ashira Azais, this song, the song of Hazinu. Kalema means to say kisvu Torah sheish b'shirazu. Write the Torah for yourself that has the shir of Hazinu in it. How do you know it means that? Maybe it just means write the shir of Hazinu. If you say ain't case, Sefer Torah, parshas. Sefer Torah is not allowed to be written in seven parshas.
You could write the shira, and that's not the Sefer Torah.
No, you're not allowed to write the independent parshas of Sefer Torah. You have to have a whole Sefer Torah. Just have a parsha by itself. That's not allowed.
You're not allowed to write this.
No, that's not allowed. The Rambam is going to tell it to us more extensively.
They didn't have Sfarim. They didn't have Sfarim. So you want.
Yeah, the Rambam is saying more later on in the end of the parak. Talk about this, I believe. But so Torah Shal Perek B'chal couldn't write down. Torah Shal Chsav also had to write a whole Sefer Torah. Now the truth is, well, when you can write a separate Chumashim, so maybe you could say it just means Sefer Devarim. Okay, the Mefarshim talk about that. But okay, that understood to mean that you can only write the entire Sefer Torah. Even the Sefer Devarim, the din is that you have to, if you write it separate, you have to write all 5 chumashim with 5 separate scrolls, perhaps. You now just have one. It has to be sort of either sewn together, or there has to be some sort of association. That's how it's understood. It means to write the whole entire Torah. That's the mark for this mitzvah, the pasuk of this mitzvah. Every year must write himself a Sefer Torah. Now, if every year did it, means hopefully the parents did it. If the parents did it, you already have a Sefer Torah already. So if you inherited a Sefer Torah, you already have one.
You can have.
If you grant, mitzvah lichtei mishlei. It's a mitzvah to write your own. And if you write it on your own hand, it's as if you received Har Sinai. The Rambam is implying that there's an option to have someone else write it for you as a shliach.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so and the Mefarshim over here have a whole thing. What's the Rambam Meshita? Is the mitzvah to write it for yourself? Or the Arvash you could have it do someone else do for you as a shliach, but the mitzvah is for you, or is the mitzvah to have written for you? So it's like there's no meaning of mitzvah but yeshim b'shlucha if you do it yourself more than somebody else. It's not clear. But okay, if you don't have an option, the parents don't know how to write a Sefer Torah, so someone else write it for you. If you correct the Sefer Torah, even one letter of it, it's as if you read the whole entire thing, because that one letter wouldn't be kosher. Then Bez Sikha will explain that the get of this mitzvah is based on a Shagasaya. I think that the mitzvah is to really have Svarim to learn Torah. That's what it's there. The main chiv is to buy Svarim, and you also have to fulfill the Indian of writing a lemon Sefer Torah. That's like that's a more involved issue. Okay.
If it's a Sefer Torah with a psul, and you fix that psul, it's like you wrote the whole Torah.
That's what Rambam says. Which means if you have someone write it for you, do the last letter yourself. Right. Or any letter actually, because Sefer Torah doesn't have to be written in order.
They say by seeing Sefer Torah that if the whole Sefer Torah was written, you have a seam. If you had it that was used previously and you fixed it, you made it kosher, you don't make a whole seam.
Fine, maybe inside that, I don't know. Inside this, it's considered. It has credited. Apparently, yeah. Halcha base. The Melech has to write himself another Sefer Torah. This one is not enough. The Rambam is going to talk about this also in Hilchos Malachim. The Shem Melech, as the sake of a Melech, Yasal Sefer Torah besides the one he wrote for himself, as every Yid has to have. Shemar, it says, when he sits on the throne of his kingship, the constantly he writes himself a Sefer Torah. This Sefer Torah, the Melech, has to be cross-checked against the Sefer Torah that was in the Azara, the Beis Hamikdash, from which the Kohen Gadol read every Yom Kippur, from which the Melech read in Hakim. Now, some Gesayis think say Sefer Ezra, the Sefer Torah of Ezra Sefer. But the truth is, I think there was a sefer in the Azar before Ezra sefer, the Bias Rishon, I think. So, all right. In any event, now you have two. What do you do, right? What's the two sefer? The one he had before he was the Melech, that he puts in storage, so to speak. The one that's written for him, mind you, it says. Let's see, he wrote, who cost him, written for him. Okay. Once he became the Melech, they should be with him constantly. He goes to war, this secretary should be with him. He comes back and should be with him. He's sitting by as or judging as the Melech can judge, although out the Bezdin, out the Melech, whichever way it is, it should be with him. He reclines, meaning has a Suda, it should be opposite him. It says, he should be with him, he should be with him all the days of his life. You remember when Hilchos Tefilin is a student, what's the din? If he has a Sefer Torah that he inherited from his ancestors, he became a Melech, he didn't have any Sefer Torah. So he had one from his ancestors. Does that count as the one for he could have the Tzaddik Hedyot, and then even anyways the one as a Melech he's going to write? Does that count, or does he have to now write two? So we said it seems to be a stira between the Ram says over there and over here.
And most people in those times knew how to write a Sefer Torah.
I don't know. But
If you don't know how to write.
If it was a mitzvah, every he had to do was a mitzvah he was taught to. At least one point, again, when in history, I'm not sure we're talking, but Pasha's answer is, yeah, I don't know. Gimel.
Pretty incredible.
I don't know if it has to be the Sefer Torah that's written mamish and writing Lashon Kodesh on cloth with ink is not the biggest chachma. It wouldn't be a Sefer Torah you would sell now and people were jealous of. Again, it's the basic Sefer Torah to be kosher.
With all the target and all everything.
Those are mahakir. So that was a tell us all that, by the way. So we'll see. Okay, let's go back there. Halacha Dal. No, sorry. Halacha Gimel. Okay, this is what I meant to say. I jumped again. When he became the Melech, he did not have any Sefer Torah. If he had one, we just said he writes the second one. He didn't have any Sefer Torah. He has to write two after he became the king. So one he puts in storage. The second one, which as I just said, is constantly with him. No, not Geniza as in Sheamus. Not as in safeguarding. Because remember, he has to, let's say for example, if he becomes demoted, the Melech can be deposed, right? If he becomes Mitzvah, he has to leave office, different things can happen. And if that happens, I don't know if he keeps a second Sefer Torah. He has to. A kid's advice always, does it need to have a Sefer Torah besides the fact he's a Yid? Then as the Melech has to have another Sefer Torah, and they're both Negeya.
It becomes a mitzvah.
Two separate mitzvahs. It's two separate mitzvahs, that's the word. It's two, as you look at the mitzvahs, there's a mitzvah for every to have a Sefer Torah. There's a mitzvah for the Melech to write a Sefer Torah. You can't kill two birds with one stone. So that's why, in other words, I'm not telling you to not use it. The point is you don't have to keep it. You do with it whatever, as the Melech, which one should he be relearning from? The one he had, where as a Melech?
And a king becomes a mitzvah, he can't be king?
Yes, correct. That's happened in history one time, actually. Which Melech, the Chazir, his name is. Yeah, I think in Hilchos Tefilin it says as well. Chastras, excuse me.
I mean, he gets rid of it, he can find something again?
I don't remember. The other things that could happen with Melech could Melech voluntarily leaves the throne. Okay. He knew what's the word? Abdicate, right? Yeah. He should only the time the Sefer Torah should be different from him is when at nighttime. Or when he goes at night, he sleeps, he can't learn, right? Or the Beis Melech goes to the bathhouse, or the Beis Kisa goes to the bathroom, or usually when he goes to Simatasi on his bed. Oh, the Rambam said before Balayla, what does that mean? Does that mean to sleep? So it means.
He's actually sleeping, he doesn't put it in bed with him.
Yeah, okay, so a component of the point is that when he's sleeping in the daytime, or at night, the B'chlal Lav Dafki has to have it with him, apparently. Alright. Now, the Sefer is written without the proper, the lining, the ruling, it's called, right? The indentations. To write it smoothly, to write it in a straight line. Or she calls something Sefer Torah written on Gvil. B'diavad written on Klaf. Right? If you write it partially on this, partially on that, puzzle to puzzle. If Ibn Chacham thinks, I can't afford Gvil, so I'll do half Klaf. No, it's not. It doesn't work. She writing writing which is very, very nice writing, very legible. Yeah. Between every single word should be the size of a small letter. And between every single line should be like a distance of a line. It's called double space, I believe, right? There's single space and what do you call it? The length of a line should be 30 letters. However big or small your writing is, the proportion of a letter to the line of Sefer Torah should be 30 letters. Each one of those words is 10 letters. Shoshim 3 times. In other words, some of these letters are thicker. Yud is thinner, right? And Mem is thicker, but that's like the shear of the 30 letters. 3 times Mishpachei Sechem, which is 10. And Chagav, we write Mishpachei Sechem, I think, according to our Masur, without a vav. Ram is using it as a way to tell us how to write it 10 letters. 3 times, 30 letters. Wow. That is the ideal length of every single column. The line should be shorter than this. Shouldn't look like a letter, like a standard letter. Standard letters are written like short columns. Like a newspaper, like column how it is. That's not how a Sefer Torah is supposed to be. It should be longer than this. His eyes should not be wandering on the line. If when he gets to the end, it's longer than that. To go back to the beginning, he's gonna be like lost. Where's the next line? Shorter lines, 30 letters or less, and make it easier so you don't skip the lines. You don't have to like in the Gemara, right? When you get to the big Gamudim, you gotta go back to the beginning of the line. It takes you a minute to figure out where the beginning of the line is. So the shorter columns is easier. The thinner column, more narrow column. It's not appropriate that you should suddenly, when you come to a situation where between the space and the parashas, you're going to have to make the next parasha is going to have to be called the stuma, let's say, which has to start earlier on that line versus the next line. And you chapsif, 1 second, according to this, I'm not going to be able to do it properly. I'm going to make the letters smaller so it should be thinner, so I should be able to make the next one a proper stuma. Rather than, you should not get in the situation. In other words, you should avoid the scenario. If you have to erase and go back, you can do that, right? But the point is that you shouldn't do that. That's not it's not nice to Sefer Torah. Some of the ksaf should be large letters or average, and some of them suddenly you get to a place where it's very small. It doesn't look. All right. If you have a situation where suddenly you have a word which is 5 letters long, and you only have enough space in my part of the word at the end because they can go out to the margin. You shouldn't do it in a way where you like two letters in the margin. And 3 are sticking out of the margin, meaning at this point already, Ram is making the assumption that we know, or we assume that based on Seichel, that the margins should be even. It looks nicer if it's even in the beginning and the end.
But now it's not going to be even.
Well, now suddenly you get to a line where that you have a space for only part of the word. You have 5 letters. So if you don't write anything, it's not even because it's too short. If you write the whole word, it's going to be too long. So the Rambam says you shouldn't do it, ideally not in a way where you have 2 letters in the margin, 2 letters outside the margin. Right, try to fit 3 in the margin. And the 2 outside, so at least the majority is inside the margin. Doesn't look as messy. It's not shaykh. You only have the ability to write 2 letters in the margin, the other 3 will be outside. In that case, better leave the 2 letter space blank and then go back to the next line. So you have 2 letters off the margin, either 2 letters blank, 2 letters sticking out, but 3 you shouldn't do. Now you have a letter which is a word 2 letters long, and the problem over here is that there's not enough space to write the whole thing.
Only 2 letters.
But you have the end of the line. You only have room for 1 letter. Yeah. So you shouldn't say, okay, I'm going to have it sort of like between the margins. You have to go back to the beginning of the line, or you can say like you're saying, which is you got to the end. I have a 2-letter word. If I'm allowed to have 2 letters at the end of a word sticking out, I'll have a full word of 2 letters sticking out. No, that says no. Don't do that. If it's a full word, go back to the beginning of the next line. Because you don't need to.
And the margin is not so different at that point because there's only 1 letter.
Let's say at the end of the line, and to save space, because now if I'm going to have to add these two, because every time you have to make a new, at the end it might mean you have to make a whole other column, a whole other sekaf. So you want to and have the 2-letter word, like if it's gag or whatever, roof, just stick out of the line. No, it's not. It's its own word. You shouldn't do that. Therefore, go back to the beginning of the next line. So what do you do if you have now a letter which is 10 letters long, or more or less than 10 letters? Now the truth is only 1 word in the Torah 10 letters long. I think so. For us, it's Uva Mishari saying, which is the kneading bowls by the makkah, by the frogs that go in the kneading bowls. So akitzer, the frogs will go Uva Mishari Secha and in the kneading bowls. Like that's the only letter I think in the Torah that's 10 letters long. Akitzer, you have a situation with this 10-letter long word. or maybe a bit more, a bit less. You don't have the ability to write the entire 10 letters in the margin. Here, because it's so long, so the point is it's more than 5 letters long, as unlike before. So if you can write at least half in the margin,
that's really
or half outside.
That's really sticking out.
Because again, here over here, what's the choice? You have a choice. Either you're supposed to leave a blank space of 5 letters, or sticking out 5 letters. What should you do? So you write it as long as you're going to have have half of it in the margin. In Lav, if you can't do that, if only for 4 letters, you have 6 letters sticking out. Or even if it's a 6-letter word, you can have 3 letters in the margin, 3 letters out of the margin. Even then you shouldn't do that. So that you could do. Sorry, that you could do. The point is that if whatever, even though over here, if it's a 7-letter word, you only have room for 3 letters. Don't write 4 letters out of the margin. We said if it's a 10-letter word, I can write 5 in the margin, 5 out of the margin, because you have no choice. And so apparently, besides the idea that there's a certain amount of letters you want sticking out, less the better. Each word is judged independently. Right. 4 letters sticking out from a 7-letter word is the majority of that word. Looks more messy than 5 letters sticking out from a 10-letter word. It's only half of that word. It's not a majority. Okay. If you can't do that, then just leave it blank. Don't have the majority sticking out. Go back to the next line.
Somehow, in our Sefer Torah is not.
Because our Sefer Torah, I think we got. It's a very, very standard. Like all the Sefer Torah are the same. Like the Megillah, right? It's all the same. Pretty much the same. Yeah, sorry, I think so. Halach Zayin again, because today who writes? Only Sofim write. That'd be Nutnik. That every single not yuk, every single person wrote those Sefer. Okay, Zayin. Between each one of the 5 svarim, each one of the 4 spaces between the svarim, you should have 4 blank lines without writing, not more, not less. This is the Hilchos. No, Psucha is where each parsha, here between Bereshit and Shemayis to Vayikra, you have 4 full lines blank. Right. Yeah. The Rambam actually, is that considered a parsha Psucha? According to the Rambam, the Psucha and Stumel is a space between the parsha. It's not the parsha itself. And it makes a difference if you do it wrong. You have to erase the entire thing with just enough lines just to rearrange it. According to the Rambam, it could be that's fine. Others saying hold not the Ferish. The Raiport wrote about this once.
What?
If you write, let's say you were supposed to write a next parsha Psucha, and you write a Stumel, or vice versa. Yeah. You finish the entire parsha, then you guys made a mistake. Can you left to just erase a couple lines and the first few lines to rearrange it? According to many people, the answer is no. You have to erase the entire parsha. Why? Because the din of Psucha Stumah is the entire writing, not just the space. I'm not sure the Rambam holds like that. Okay. Now, so now the Rambam does not, when he says he's going to tell us next parak, all the Psuch and all the Stumas, he doesn't describe the first parsha of each Chumash. Why says according to the Rambam, it's not a din in that every Chumash starts at the beginning of the line. So according to the Rambam, it's not the space. It's not the parsha itself. It's a space. All right. So you ask the Chumash and Chumash, you start the next Chumash from line 5. You finish Bereshis, leave 4 lines blank. Line 5, you start Be'el Shemayis. When you finish the Sefer Torah, you're supposed to finish at the bottom, in the middle. Because if not, the guy in the public is going to think the Sefer Torah is not finished. He's not going to know it's the end. He thinks there's more to the Torah. He's going to start, looking for adding the Mishigas. If it's in the middle of the line, you know that's the end. There's a reason why we stop with this, because that's the end. And it's supposed to be at the bottom daf because it looks nicer. Now, what if you get to that end of the Elikol Yisrael? You're halfway down the column. Right? Or you cheshbon, you're going to be halfway down the column the way you figured out. Now I'm going to tell us in the future parak how to sort of write a Sefer Torah ideally. Let's say to come out, that's how it's going to be. So what you do, these words are fast. These are words, every single time I learn this, it's very enigmatic what I mean. The katzer v'oiler. The katzer, what does this mean? So last time around we explained, the katzer means that you make the lines narrower. You make, let's say, only 1 or 2 words. So instead of making 30 letters per line, as you do till now, make it 6 letters per line. So a very small, narrow column. This way, by the time you get to the bottom, you have you're at the bottom already. The katzer, you make it and then it comes out that the column rises, or its height is as such, you get to the bottom. That's one way of doing it. Over here, you want to say it differently. The katzer says you write larger letters. This way, the column is the same length. But you use this column punkt, you have much larger letters, so it's less. I
thought we don't make bigger and smaller letters.
So he's saying here, because over here you do this for this purpose. The katzer, you make the letters larger. This way, a katzer, you have less letters per line, but it's still the same amount of inches. But it turns out that's how you cheshbon out the.
Nowadays they do the shirtut, the vezisa bracha, less open. I think it's smaller margin.
Because vezisa bracha is a shir, it's different surah b'chal, no? because it's not a regular column. It's on two other side, and the middle is blank, right?
No, that's the shira. That's
Hazini was like that also, no?
There's a bracha.
Yeah.
But the last one, I think is.
They catch me out. They figured it out. There's a way the system how to make this
And
happen.
also, but nowadays we do it from a tikkun.
Right.
Any tikkun, he tells you how many.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You get the man, follow the manual, you won't go wrong. It's like IKEA. Yaschil betchilas hashita figma. Say again?
Lahavdil.
Right, lahavdil. Yaschil betchilas hashita, aligvas hashita, and then you start from the beginning of the next. Start from the beginning of the line and don't finish it. In other words, that last line you should be in a way where you start at the beginning. And then before you get to the end of the line, you write the last word of Yisrael and Shomai, and that's it. This way you're miskaven that it's going to be that the words of Eini Kol Yisrael are the middle of the line at the end of the page. Now it makes the assumption that we know that those last words in the Torah, because he told us in the Hakdama to learn Torah Shel Chasab before you learn his Sefer. Alright, these are Ba'esis HaKadelis, Ba'esis HaKatanis, Ba'esis HaMekude. You should be very careful with letters. The tradition is in large letters and the small letters, and then letters that have dots on top of them. And the letters that are made in a different surah. He doesn't explain over here exactly what the Rambam means. The Rambam himself, he doesn't tell you which letters in the Torah are big, small. He tells later on which parashas of Psuch and Stuma.
Right.
He tells us the parashas of Tefillin and Mezuzah, which words are Molei Chassid.
Right.
But the rest of the Torah doesn't tell you. He makes the assumption you can look, you figure out yourself. I'm not sure why. Even though the Chayyim told us, just like Tefillin, it's not kosher if it's extra vav or right, let's say face with the wrong amount of vavs or not. Chumash also. So the Chumash you know from the Tefillin that told us. Let's say the whole Chumash Bereshis. We don't. That doesn't tell us what the Psuch system, what the Molei and Chaser is, but he assumes that we're going to look up ourselves. He doesn't tell us also what letters are big and small. Like he doesn't tell us the Ayin of Shema is big or mashal, but he assumes that you're going to last class there were two. I think. Exactly, off because small. All these, but it's a Messiah, and he tells you you're going to also the letters which are tzuras and mishunis of unusual form. So. He doesn't tell you exactly what he's referring to, but okay, going to pain on the fufa is the pays that are wrapped around. The crooked letters again. So the Rambam doesn't tell us exactly what it means, but the Rishonim apparently there's a sefer called Kira Sefer the Meiri which goes through this, and I'm not sure exactly what he's referencing.
He has a picture. He has a picture of the pay and the S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
See it?
Right. Oh, so which ones are? Does he tell you which ones over there are like that? Where in the Torah it is?
It says this is a crooked and this is a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently, I guess different hagim how that's done, right? Fine. So apparently, he says in Masechus Seifrim, which is like one of the smaller sectors, it tells you all these things in the back of the Gemara over there. Okay, fine. And how do you know this? As the Seifrim were taught, teaching the students, father to son. You should be careful with the crowns and the amount of crowns for the letters. Some letters have one crown. Some have seven. I think our main apparently says over here is either 3 or 1. We don't do 7. Okay. The whole Hatagin in the Sefer Torah.
On one letter, that's a lot of crowns.
In the Mezuzah we do that, I think. Right? Not this. Chol Hatagin is Sos and Zayin hanging Dakin Kotasayda. All the Tagin, these crowns are a tiny Zayin, which is just a hairbreadth. Look at this. These are all things that are for the ideal scenario. If you change this form, you weren't careful with the crowns, the cost of call aces, call signon. As long as you want all the letters proper form, or even let's say a person made the lines closer together, or they're farther from each other, or made them wider or smaller. For example, you have a Sefer Torah, instead of one line is 30 letters, one line is 20 letters. It's not even. As long as you did not connect one letter to another, you didn't add or take away a letter. No letter is misformed. And the Psuchas Parashas, as Ram tells us, passes the bar. There are certain things the Gemara does not tell us. However, they are customs among the scribes. It's a tradition by them. Teaching the students. They are. No, these till the Rambam, it was Torah Shabbat Peh. Now the Rambam is going to spill the beans and tell you exactly how it's done. The minimum amount of lines on a column should be a minimum of 48 lines. And maximum of 60. Now,
That's a big difference.
ideally, it should be the same as without the Sefer Torah, apparently. But whichever one, choose a number. But somewhere between that. The space between the parashas, we talk about, for example, Psucha or Stuma, it should be 9 letters. Now, that l'chayr is the Ikar Hadin will learn, but that's I'm telling us that's the shir. Asher, Asher, Asher. That's the sheet of 3 lines, 9 letters. Excuse me, 3 words. And then the column on top of above, which could also mean the previous column, right? Of the Ashir of Yashir, the first letter on each line should be as follows. The words. I'm not going to translate them. Haboyim, Bayabasha, Hashem, Meis, Mitzrayim, Chamesh, Chitin. 5 lines on top of the shira, or 5 lines prior to the shira. If it's the top of the shira, the column, you go back to the previous column. They should start with these words. And the 5 lines after the shira, those 5 lines, the first word in each line should be as follows. Fatikach, that's regarding Miriam, right? Fatikach Miriam. Achadeh, Sus, Veyetu, Veyevayu. Now, before the shira of Azinu, the first word in each line should be Va'ida. Those 6 lines start with those words each. And 5 lines after Shiva Azinu, the first word should be Vayavai, Daver, Asher, Hazes, Asher. These are all ideal. If possible be changed, it's not possible. However, a person who writes a word is supposed to have a vav or a yud, you took out the vav or yud. Or if it's missing vav or yud, you add the vav or yud. A word which is, you write it the way it's read. Instead of writing the way it's, certain many words in the Torah, it's written one way, but you pronounce it differently. And it's kriink, right? If you write it the way you pronounce it, because Yishkasav Yishkavena, B'makim Yishkalena, right? The word is Yishkalena, when you pronounce it, Yishkavena, if you write it that way, with Chayim Makam Abba, that's actually not the Chumash, that's the Tanakh, that's a Navi, I believe. That's in Shaftim, right? At Chayim, instead of Apalim, you wrote to Chayim, which is how you pronounce it. That word means hemorrhoid. So there's a better word that's used. It's a more able word, and so that's how it's. Anyway, kids, if you write it that way, if you change the space between the parashas of Psuch and Stuma, you wrote a shira as a regular format. You didn't write the special format of the shira. Or you wrote a regular parasha, the format of the shira. Therefore, does not have the Kedusha V'Torah. It's like a chumash when you teach kids, but it doesn't have the Kedusha of a Sefer Torah. Now, are you yielding with that the mitzvah of writing yourself a Sefer Torah? Does the Sefer Torah for yourself have to be a Kedusha Sefer Torah? Yeah, good question. I'm not sure. I would say yes, but I'm not sure. You base. Sefer Torah and Muga Sefer Torah, that's not corrected. It's not checked over. Also, now keep out 3 days. Once you have Sefer Torah hanging around with mistakes, that's how you get mistakes and different people opinions of what's supposed to say. And if it's not exactly what it's supposed to be, get rid of it. Right? You don't say it's better than nothing. No, it's not. Either the right way or nothing. I mean, you can either fix it or put it in shames. Sefer Torah sheish by shalosh mutuis is called daf. If there has 3 mistakes per daf on average, you can fix it. However, if it's an average of 4, you're going to put it in shames. If the majority of sefer is corrected, but the minority has 4 mistakes per daf, as long as you have 1 daf of the minority, this I'm explaining it, if I'm correct, that doesn't have those 4 mistakes on that average, then Harish Takan is still salvageable. The mad one is a shu shikasa. We're talking about a case where how is it salvageable if you wrote something which, for example, is supposed to have a vav without a vav. In which case, it's more problematic, and that's why you put in Shemus. Because if you're going to have to start adding letters, it's going to be makes you going to have to add, space the lines out. It's going to look problematic. If it's something which is supposed to be not a vav, you put a vav in. If there's any mistakes, you can fix it. You just scrape out the vav, make the other letter a little bit longer. That's why you are allowed to write each chumash independently, as long as it's a full chum bracious, full shemayis. That's what we said before. Who says shir azayis means write the whole Sefer Torah? Maybe write the shir azayis means write the varim. Okay, so we said it means write Sefer Torah. It does not have the din of a Sefer Torah. You should not write independent patches or scrolls of parts of the Torah. That's how we know it means to write Shiva Zim means the whole Sefer Torah. They call you Megillah L'Tinnig L'Tamah, but you don't write it just for a kid to learn from it. If you're eventually going to complete to write an entire Chumash, then it's fine. Kasa Megillah Shalosh Teves Shishta'achas. If you wrote a Megillah, it's a small scroll of a part of the Torah, 3 words on one line, then it's mutter, as long as it's not more than that. You're allowed to make one big scroll.
What does that mean?
That means that you're allowed to write just three letters, 3 words, on one line just for a kid to learn. That's okay. That's the maximum. And every word, 3 words. Every line, 3 words.
What are you writing?
You're writing for like the Ram just said not to write a patch of a Sefer Torah, but if you wrote in a way that's 3 words per line, then it's mutter apparently. You have one big scroll of the entire Tanakh. Between each chumash should have 4 lines. You have 3 lines. The chayr you have to start in the kavanah, because if you write the kavanah Sefer Torah, then you finish. You know what? I'm going to do a whole Tanakh. You're not allowed to do that. You're passing a Sefer Torah. So you have to do the kavanah lechatchila. Okay. So between each Sefer of Navi, like between Yeshua, Sheftim, Shmuel, 3 lines. And between each one of the 12 Nevi'im, 3 lines. This way, you want to cut it and give each one of your kids and Yerusha a separate part of it. It's fine. What's the Seder of Navi? Now I'm going to give it to halacha. If you write the Sefer Tanakh, you have to follow the Seder. It's an order in Torah. What is the order? It's the Machlekes in the Gemara, I believe. It says Yeshua, Sheftim, Shmuel. Doesn't say Shmuel Shmuel Beis. You know why? Because the Christians invented that. That's why. Malachim, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya, Treyaser. They say that Ksuvim is Rus, Tehillim, Iyod, Mishlei, Koheles, Shashim, Kinais, which is Eicha, Daniel, Megillah, which we call Esther, the Ezra, which we call Ezra Nehemiah, Divrei Yamim. Now, what is the order of the Nevi'im and Treyaser? I don't know if the Rambam tells us, but it says also what the Seder that is. Okay, Tazayim. All these kids even you have to write with the rule line, not just Torah. I feel because if it's written on paper, which is not kosher for Torah, because it has to be bakavadik straight lines. Rule, that's called. 3 words without sitr is fine. This giant scroll of Tevin Ksuvim, the Aleppo Codex, I believe, is like this. It's the Aleppo Codex, which is the famous. I'm going to talk about it in the next program. It's like one of the most authoritative, sources of how to spell Tanakh. Okay, so this giant Tanakh ain't it's not the whole Sefer Torah. It's a chumash. I look at the whole chumash. Since you added, it's like you took away. I had to cut in Shita. The animal has extra limbs, like it's missing straight. That's what's possible. Now to answer your question, what does that mean when he said Halacha Dalet, right? So he says. Let's read the end of Halacha Dalet again. Kasav Megillah Shalosh Teves Shishta'achas. If you write a Megillah, 3 words per line. Now on every line you write just 3 words, and then so you go to the next line each time. That's mutter. That apparently is a way to prevent you from writing too much of the Torah Shulchan at once.
Once? What does that mean?
This is a beer. This means like the way you skip a line each time. That's the content of when it's mutter. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but.